KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty of Weaselton. Dagan, welcome. Wesselton. Or Weaseltown or whatever the fuck they say.
Weaseltown. In summer.
Oh,
nice.
Wow. A little croony. Good. I like that. Well, how are you doing today, my friend?
Everything's good. It's actually frigging freezing out there. It's cold. It's windy. Very appropriate.
Perfect.
For today's topic.
Indeed.
Now, Kyle, you're wearing the shirt.
Yeah.
Is this something? Is this a nod to something going on in your life today?
Well, we're recording an hour later than usual. Dagan was nice enough to do that because Aaron Rodgers was appearing on Pat McAfee's show, and I love Pat McAfee, and Rodgers has been on Pat McAfee all the time for years. So when this was announced, I asked Dagan to push it an hour because I assumed this was going to be discussed, and it was awesome. I mean, he's still under contract with the Packers, but he said that his intention is to play for the Jets, and they're just waiting to. They're working it out, behind the scenes, what the deal will look like. And
sweet.
Yeah, I was super elated. And I wanted to give a quick shout out before we get into it to Pat McAfee himself. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but
no.
Pat McAfee was a punter on the Colts for many years.
Nice.
And he quit basically during his career to go do podcasts. And people were like, what? Yeah, like almost like what he was originally going to Barstool.
Wow.
As I recall. And he was making millions of dollars a year or whatever. And everyone was kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? And it ended up being that he's just created over the last several, 5 years or so, like maybe the biggest gaming or biggest sports kind of platform for podcasts and shows. And he had like almost 500,000 people watching the show on YouTube, which is more than people that watch like CNN at night.
On a live YouTube show.
Right.
Wow. Holy cow.
So it's pretty cool. So I was like, wow, man, you should check him out. Pat McAfee, MCAFEE, if anyone
good for him
is curious. He's great. They're hysterical and really, really good stuff for sports.
When did he do that? How old was he when he did this? And also, how long ago was this that he sort of abandoned his professional sports career for? I
want to say it was like 5 years ago, maybe. I'm going to look now and see. Yeah, his last season was 2016.
Okay.
And then he stopped to do Pat McAfee. He went to Barstool, and then he created like his own company, and then he's actually a like a WWE character as well. Like pretty. I think you'd actually like him. You should check him out. He's an interesting guy.
That's a really interesting strategy. Just because if you're half good at doing a podcast and you bring over your professional sports following to doing a sports talk show or YouTube content or podcasting, whatever. Yeah, it's a no-brainer if you think about it, really. It's bold because you're leaving a lucrative career, but especially if that's his passion, more power to this guy. I definitely will check this out.
But so it's very exciting, and it's like so much pressure off. Like it's occupied a lot of my time, not that it should be. All right, so
good news.
Yes.
For Jets
fans. So today's episode, especially today's episode of KnockBack, though, that we're here to do is for the 2013 film Frozen, as I'm sure everyone knows if you've clicked on this. And I was interested in this. You brought this up, and my initial reaction to it was, I don't want to watch Frozen. But like that was like a very quick reaction. But then I realized you were saying like it's this year will be its 10th year out, and it was obviously this incredible cultural phenomenon, and I had missed it. And so I actually had very quickly was just thinking to myself after you said that, I was like, yeah, no, that's actually probably good. Like, I feel like Frozen's probably something I should actually see. I don't know why I've not seen it. I don't even really know what it's about. And we're going to talk about that. It's very different than I thought it was as far as what it was about, who it was about. For instance, Elsa's not really the main character. And I didn't really know that. So that's new, but I got to say, and I'll throw it over to you. I mean, we're going to get a lot deep into this as we always do. And since it's an animated piece, we're going to get a lot of your insight into all of this as well, which I'm excited about. But I have to say, I thought this movie was awesome. And it was fun and kind of sad. I think it was well paced. it reminds me that you don't have to explain anything or everything in movies, especially in these kinds of movies. How did she get her powers? Where did they come from? Why can't she control? They don't really explain too much, and yet it just all feels like it works at a brisk pace. And I really like some of the characters. I just think that Anna's a really awesome character. Sven, the reindeer, is an awesome character. I just love the way some of the animals are represented in this, and I'm a huge fan of a couple of the kind of side to what is it, Timon, Pumbaa, and what is
sure. Pumbaa and Timon, from Lion
King. From Lion King.
Yeah.
So kind of like that vibe. So I don't know. I dug it. I dug it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I thought it was really cute and fun. I also thought it was like very female, which I think is good and much needed and appropriate. It's not just a feminine. It's not just for girls. So it's not like I don't know. You can kind of interpret Aladdin, certainly The Little Mermaid, but Aladdin even as being for girls, because it's more of about a love story, and that's really central to it and all of this. But the love story is the backbone of Frozen, but not really. And the nature of the love and who loves who and all of this, I think, is good too. In other words, it's a very dark film with a female slant that's for little girls, I think, mostly. And I'm sure boys loved it. I mean, if I was a little boy, I would have loved this movie too. So it's not, I'm not saying it was just that. But yeah. So what do you think? I mean, I'm curious to know your I've never talked 1 second to you about this film before. I'm curious to know why you wanted to do it and what you think of it.
Yeah, I'm relieved to hear that you liked it, because sometimes it's like, I'm throwing this down Colin's throat. I don't know if we're going to go for this, but I figured for a bunch of reasons, right? You mentioned the 10-year anniversary later in the year. November marks 10 years for Frozen. So I figured everybody's going to be talking about it on the 10th anniversary. Let's get a little ahead of the curve, a little ahead of the pack on that. And I have a very rich history with this movie because, of course, I had little ones when it came out almost 10 years ago. And I suspect a lot of people miss this, especially if there weren't little kids in your direct orbit, little kids in your home. I think a lot of people probably missed this one. And it is a good movie. I love what you say about the boy-girl appeal dynamic, because I watched that play out with my then 3-year-old son, because my oldest, Lilia, was 6 when this came out. So she was right in the target audience for this movie. But my son, I think it's one of those films I would argue is so good that the boys can't really pretend to hate it. They pretend they're grudgingly watching it while really enjoying it, which I think is kind of a hard dance for a Disney to do something like that appeals to everybody, especially when it is kind of girly on its surface. And I was thinking back, this movie was and later on it would become a franchise and a 2-part thing, and TV and all the things. So it becomes this whole entity unto itself. But it is so big and it was so huge that I think it is worth investigating again and again into why, kind of reading into it. I remember when it first came out, I saw it in the movie theater once, opening week or whatever it was, and sort of enjoying it, but definitely having my problems with it and never really sitting down to watch it again. But it was one of those films that was on in the background, especially 2014, 2015. It was playing in the car. It was playing in the living room while I was making dinner. It was always on. So I was always subjected to it. But it was cool to go back and actually watch from A to Z again and just kind of re-examine it with how old was I then? I was 39 when it came out. I'm 49 now. Just kind of an old man Dagan perspective. See what new takeaways I could get. I do remember 3 things about it initially, just in watching it once. I remember how huge it was. It was a phenomenon. We had the toys. Lilia had the Elsa and Anna dress-ups. We saw Frozen on ice. Like, it was a thing that the kids really loved, right? Like, it was definitely a Moriarty tradition for the first couple 2 to 3 years that it was out. I also remember thinking to myself, in a Disney CG movie, wow, this has a huge visual anime influence to it. And I could take that back to Disney starting to tie anime into their design with even their traditional offerings late in the 90s, like Tarzan, for instance. And then later, a few years prior to Frozen with things like Tangled in their CG stuff. But I do remember thinking like, wow, they're taking a page out of anime/manga's book with the design. And I also remember the last thing I really remember about it was especially the first half of the film is very fast. It tells a lot of story in a short time. It moves at a very brisk pace. I think it slows down a little bit in the second part.
Mm-hmm.
But the first half of the movie is very, very almost, it's frenetic, almost to the point of rushed. I remember thinking that the first time watching it, even in the movie theater, sitting there like, wow. And then watching it again on Disney Plus, I'm like, wow, they actually tell the whole story and set everything up in 8 minutes clean. That's with the opening credits and everything. So that was a stark takeaway too. And I do have new takeaways from this movie, but I like it even better now than I did back then. I'm a big mark for Tangled, which came out in 2010, so 3 years prior to this. But I walk away maintaining that I understand largely what all the fuss is about with Frozen. And I can't wait to break it down with you. And there's always some fear. There's always some trepidation with me for doing these topics because, I'm throwing you into a space that, we're talking about a kid's movie. But I figured, listen, we haven't talked about an animated film in a while. We recently did Spider-Verse. We did Ghost in the Shell not too long ago, Ninja Scroll. I think it's been a while since we did a proper Disney film. This is a little more modern, but it just about slates into our 10-year fast and loose knockback rule. So let's break it down however you want, my friend. Let's do this. My friend.
Yeah, we're breaking rule. It doesn't matter. It's our show. We can break rules however we want. It's not technically 10 years until this winter, this fall. But nonetheless, yeah, I don't mind child like stuff for children. I like some things that are blatantly for children. I mean, like look at our various loves over time of Nintendo, and people can kind of pitch it however they want. But Nintendo's a children's brand, and like first and foremost, which is fine. But that's what it is. Things like Metroid are, I think, exceptions to the rule. To Animal Crossing, Pokemon, Mario, Kirby. I mean, I think you guys know that. And that's totally okay. So we know lots of adults that are in the children's things. And of course, Disney adults, which are maybe the worst adults, but we don't have to go there. I did want to say this because I don't watch much Disney stuff. And I don't like Disney just as a company. But so I missed it. And I never saw this. And I'm sure it's in other animated films and everything. But I wanted to just, before we even get into the film, give a little shout out to the opening 3D Magic Kingdom thing, which I don't think I've ever actually seen before.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. And I was wondering, like, where is this supposed to be? Like, where is the Magic Kingdom? Orlando. I mean, it's literally in Orlando or Anaheim, but
right.
Because there's like a train and everything. Like, where the fuck is this? It looks like Hogwarts, kind of.
Yes.
I wanted to just throw that out there. It's meaningless, of course. And then
my kids were obsessed with that, Carl. They were obsessed with that CG Disney Magic Kingdom castle train opening. They would always, every time, both of them would be like, well, "There's the train." I don't know if it kind of made them anxious or something, but they always commented on it from like age 0 through age 10. They both always said a remark during that. So it is funny that you bring it up because I'll always remember that. Like they were just, we grew up with that Buena Vista / Disney, sort of 2D, very graphic castle,
which is awesome
with the, the kind of the rainbow effect or whatever. This is a lot different. This is ushering in the whole CGI era. But
that's what I was assuming was it was to represent like 3D to 2D or whatever.
Right.
But I was going to say the Walt Disney Animation Studios logo is super cool too. That they show afterwards. And I've never seen that. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like I don't think I've ever seen, I don't remember a Disney movie ever shouting out the studio, but I haven't watched Disney movies in a long time.
You know what else it is, Kyle? They have to differentiate, and it is an odd dynamic because they're Disney and Pixar are kind of a unit, but they have to differentiate between Disney Animation Studios and Pixar offerings, which gets confusing as shit if you look at the filmography.
Right, because you would assume Pixar would have done this.
Yeah, yes, in many ways. And it's interchangeable. It used to be like, all right, Disney's going to helm the more realistic princessy things, and Pixar's going to handle the more quote-unquote whimsical things. But that whole dynamic has even shuffled around where there's really kind of no rhyme or reason anymore. I would say on the outermost fringe, most people know, okay, Toy Story is Pixar. That's kind of a household name. Disney is Frozen. But beyond that, I think people largely like the civilians out there, they don't know the difference.
The civvies.
So it's a branding thing,
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was just cool to see Mickey, and also just how it reminds me, and I love just how hard Disney is trying to protect this IP and like trying to hold on to it for as long as humanly possible, so it's not bastardized like they've already done Winnie the Pooh. I can't wait for Mickey to join the public domain. That's going to happen.
Oh, it's so weird, and
it's going to be crazy. I think about that sometimes too. With just, I mean, this is a total tangent, but this is knockback of like the stuff I love today, but also the stuff that I create will technically join the public domain. Not that anyone's going to give a shit, but I always think about things like, man, if G.I. Joe will enter the public domain in like the 2050s, or something like the a Real American Hero line.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
That's an odd way to think about it.
Yeah. And I would be like, oh my God, I'm going to be too old to do anything about that. But if I was, that would be wild. But anyway, I want to talk to you about the animation style here and what you think of the quality of it. I think that you had brought up the kind of the anime inspiration and the more stylized take, which Disney always sneaks in that kind of thing, that where you feel like it's realistic, but it's really stylized, but they kind of betray you in that way, and in a good way, where it's not quite human. And they have that here going as well. I must say that there were times where I was really astounded by how beautiful this movie was. And then there were times where I was like, wow, this looks like shit, or looks cheap. For instance, there's a scene where they're all, I think it's actually towards, I don't know where, it must be towards the end, where they're skating. Yeah. And there's no lines on the ice. And for me, I was like, wouldn't you just take the time to do that? I mean, it just looks stupid. They're on top of this clearly static, different piece of 3D modeling, and you put it on top of it. I can see how you've literally built it. And there were things like that I thought were very distracting. Not that I have a great eye for that stuff, but then there were times where I was astounded by the animation. I thought the animals especially looked really awesome. And like the horse and the reindeer, I thought were wonderful. What's his name? Olaf, the snowman, is maybe the greatest thing in this movie. I mean, he's fucking absolutely amazing. I can't even. I laughed out loud probably 10 different times in the movie, and I would say 8 times were because of him.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, he was awesome. I'm thrilled. And they bring him in so kind of late, so you kind of almost wonder what you're missing with him. But yeah, I wanted to start kind of just stylistically before we get into the story and the characters. I was wondering how you think it looks and how you think it holds up, because there are times where I'm really astounded by it, but then there are times, see, when we talk about video games, 3D games, we expect a lesser rendering quality and all of that, because you kind of have to adjust the 3D render for like almost infinite permutations of camera angles and all of these different things. But I'm always confused when I see 3D animation that is camera locked because you're watching it, and they don't do the very best to clean up every frame to make it look super real, because there's no possibility of me seeing it or clipping through it or anything like that. I'm not going to be able to do it. So just make every scene look great, and there should be no excuses. Right. And so I've noticed a little bit of balance of both. In other words, I thought the character designs were great. It was beautiful, but I was a little surprised by how cheap it looked sometimes.
Yeah, you know what? This is a great way to open up the conversation, because it's kind of a divisive era when it comes to animation and effects and just the strength of technology, because we're talking about almost a decade ago. I think by 2013 sort of perspective, but even earlier, let's say when this movie was just starting to leave pre-production and enter production proper. So let's say 2010 for argument's sake. I think that was a time where technology was getting pretty strong, and the know-how to apply all the traditional animation and traditional filmmaking techniques to the technology was getting bolstered, but it was still certainly lacking the strength that we now have in 2023, right? It wasn't that sophisticated yet. So I could definitely see its beauty and its problems. I think you're right. I think it has some moments that really hold up visually, and some moments that are almost like, whoa, that CG almost looks like Tron. Like maybe some of the best things in Tron, like when Elsa's forming her ice palace and the roof is forming overhead. It's very simple. It's not layered. There's not a lot of fancy effects or lighting. It's very one-dimensional almost. And so there's a lot to say, I think, when it comes to that. First of all, I like that this movie sort of toes the line between some really fun and cool cartoony business and some more realistic human anatomy based characters. It kind of does the best of both things, I think, to the best of its capabilities, harkening back to 2013. It's not a super cartoony movie like Pixar's Inside Out, and it's not a more realistic movie that we've gotten lately like 2021's Encanto, which is another Disney film that I highly recommend. It's brilliantly done. But you could see what they do with human characters, another 8 or 9 years on from this first Frozen offering, which, is much cooler. But I also love the fact that it's one of those things that even though we're dealing with somewhat realistic, air quote, human characters, there's a really fun stylized treatment. I talk about anime. I talk about, just making the eyes expressive, making the proportions cute, like making the facial proportions kind of like 60-30 divided up. Like most of the face is in the forehead and the mouth and nose are, kind of squeezed into a small space lower on the face, like anime. So there's a lot of cool stylistic decisions. There's one thing that bothers me about the character design in this, and then I looked back at Tangled quickly to make sure they didn't change it, and they didn't. I think it was kind of a stylistic mistake to make the teeth so realistic and differentiated. Think like the way anime or manga does a thing where it's just kind of a block of white for the upper teeth and a block of white for the bottom teeth. In other words, there's no differentiating between the teeth. I think when you have like a full set of teeth in animation, it looks a little creepy. It could be a little bit more appealing, I think, if you just kind of blur the line, maybe show the bottom ridge of the teeth, but not the fact that each tooth is separated with all that detail. I know that harkens back to a painting philosophy, a classical painting philosophy, where when you're doing a portrait of somebody, you don't want to show every detail of every tooth. You kind of blur the line and stylize it a little bit, if that's the right way to say it. So there's one thing in the character design that bothers me is that they do that with the teeth, which I think is just trying to make it a little too realistic. Like take comfort in the fact that it could be stylized and people will still realize it's, be comfortable in the fact that it's a person. And I think of the best animated offerings that have traditional human characters, but that don't try to be realistic about it. It's still stylized. It's still a decisive art direction, like Spider-Verse, like Sony's Mitchells versus the Machines, like Leica's movies, Paranorman and Coraline. They're human characters, but they take a very specific art direction and, they're playful and they treat it like animation. That's what you do. That's why you don't shoot this in live action. You could have a style, you could be playful with it and stuff like that. I see also some limitations with little things like the weight of characters. Characters feel a little weightless at times, even when they're running or jumping. The fabric animation, like trailing fabric. I think there's one scene where Elsa's running across the iced over pond or, bay, and her cape is trailing behind her. And it just it looks too stiff. You could see that the animation, the kinetics or whatever they had developed at that time to make that move fluidly wasn't really there yet, at least to today's standards. So that bothered me. And the other thing I would say is they do a beautiful job with the effects. Snow, ice, the crystallized trees, the shrubbery, the frozen landscape. They do a beautiful job with water, actual water in this, and the particles and everything. Very sophisticated. But they do really great stuff with lighting, especially magic hour lighting in this is really beautiful art direction and color direction. But they tend to overlight things in this movie, especially at night. And I think that robs you of a true sense of nighttime atmosphere and darkness, and also just feeling cold, oddly enough. There's not a lot of moments in this film, ironically, that you feel cold, where you should probably feel frigid. You should probably feel like, oh man, I want to bundle up under a blanket. Like this is cold, especially in those tense moments and stuff like that. There's a little too much warmth to the lighting, I realized in this. And I think some of it's played up for drama, almost like you would see the lighting of a stage play. You know, you got the character center stage, he's under a spotlight. I think you want to evoke a certain mood with lighting, but I think there's an unnatural, overlit kind of dynamic to this film that is a little bit unfortunate and makes it feel a little bit artificial. I like that there's certain things too, though, like you're not going to make the skin, like Anna has those cool freckles on her face and on her shoulders and stuff, but her skin doesn't look too translucent. It kind of toes the line between a human character and a doll. But I kind of understand that especially for a princess movie, because you want these characters to be almost toy-like and appealing, just probably from, it sounds shallow, but just probably from a marketing perspective. You want these things to almost read like products, and they are very appealing that way. Doesn't make it feel like, oh, those are plastic Barbie dolls moving in the scene, like Barbie in the Pixar movies or something, It feels realistic, but it still feels toy-like in an appealing way, which I like. And maybe that was intentional, and maybe they were just beholden to the technology at the time. I'm not sure which. Maybe it was kind of a combination of both things. But yeah, it's interesting to look back 10 years and see like, oh, they could do this much better. And I look at like things like Encanto where they have done it a lot better because the technology is so much more capable now. But also strong nod to the acting and the animation in this. It's brilliantly done. And that's something that's timeless. Once you figure out how to pull that off in the computer and apply everything you know about filmmaking and acting and staging and being expressive, they had already like hit the gold standard with this. I feel like they probably hit that with Tangled, because they had those films leading up to Tangled. They had Bolt. What else did they have before Tangled? They had Meet the Robinsons, Chicken Little. So they were working on this. By the time they got to Tangled and Frozen, they already understood performance, acting, and emotion. And I think that's one thing about the visuals in this movie that holds up really, really well.
Yeah, there's so much to say. I think one of the things as far as the character design that I like is, and just about the cast of characters generally, and this is what's so attractive to me about games we talk about like Wild Arms and others, is they keep the cast relatively small. Now, there are Disney movies I can think of that have even smaller casts than this, but there are Disney movies I can think of where the cast is ridiculous. There's like probably 15 characters. There's really half that many. I mean, if you don't count characters like Oaken, which I really wouldn't, although he's awesome and we'll talk about him, and stuff like that, there are really like 5 characters of any consequence.
Yeah.
Elsa and Anna, Kristoff and Hans, and the Duke, maybe. I mean, that's really the limit of the human characters. And then they invest a little bit into like some of the cute animals, like Sven and the horse, and like the Duke's horse, and then they have some creatures like the trolls and the marshmallow. But generally speaking, I like that they've really stayed focused. I felt like even in it's like 100 minutes long, but even in its brisk runtime, I felt like I got to know them pretty well. And we were talking, and let's go back to the intro, because we were talking about that intro, and I liked it. I liked how quick it was. I felt like it was actually some of the most effective storytelling I remember in recent memory to just get you to where you need to be. And it's quite sad. I don't know. See, here's the thing about Frozen is that I had no idea what the fuck it was about. My only exposure to Disney movies in this era was working with someone who would talk about how he wanted to fuck all the Disney princesses, right? And for some reason, I'm the one who got in trouble. So to me, it's like, nice. I didn't have material access to, well, I did, but I just didn't know, like I didn't have the material access in my mind to know what these movies were even about. If you came to me and told me like, what is Frozen about? I have no idea. Like, I don't even know where to begin. I know Elsa, and I know the Frozen logo, and I know little girls still have like the Frozen parties and themed parties, and it's a big IP. But I honestly had no idea what it was about. And I don't know what any of these movies you're talking about are about. Like anything in the 21st century from Disney, I'm basically like, I have no idea about any of it. So it was fun going in blind. Like I had no idea how that was even possible, but I guess it's just from sheer willful ignorance that I went all these years without knowing what it was about. So I was struck by the sadness of it. And Disney's so good at that, aren't they? Making things. Well, let me back up. Why is it that Disney gets away with doing this kind of stuff that no one else does.
They really do.
Bambi's always the big example. Now, Bambi is old, but I always think about that. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what the fuck are you doing? And I kind of felt like this in this too, in some sense, where I was like, wow, this really went off the deep end pretty quick and got pretty dark pretty quick, didn't it? And I really dug it. I dug the king and queen characters that we don't see very much of them, but I just loved the idea of, what it kind of felt like they were Romanovs, or they were some sort of like Russian imperialist house or something.
Right.
And they have these beautiful daughters, and I loved the scene of them playing and how Anna's so into Elsa's powers. And I love that I don't think they do, unless I just was ignorant of it or I was writing notes and missed it, but they don't really explain where any of this comes from, right? I mean,
no, not yet.
So it's cool and it's cute. And I love the idea of Elsa shutting everyone out because of it. Although I was also frustrated watching, being like, if all it takes is to wear gloves, then why wouldn't you just wear gloves and just be? And also, why can't you just talk about it?
Right.
See, it's one of those things where it's storytelling so funny because you could just clip it, right? It's very much the why didn't the Eagles bring the ring to Mount Doom situation.
Right.
So you're trying to tell me these Eagles could have just flown in here? 3 books ago, we could have gotten this done with, So there are definitely things you can crack at. And that was one of the things where I was like, Elsa, just talk to your sister. Just explain to her what's happening.
So cruel.
It's so strange.
It is.
But yeah, talk to me about the whole like setup, and you were talking about the quick story and kind of the quick setup. I really like that they kind of got out of the way, got that out there. And I enjoyed the ice cutting intro too. I thought it was very cute. And although I must admit, none of the songs in this did it for me.
None of the songs? Oh, we got to get
I just, they're fine. But and we'll talk about the soundtrack, and I'm writing that down to make sure now. But there's always one or two, or maybe even more songs that you remember from a movie. And I only know Let It Go because it was so famous. But even I don't think that's a good song either. It's compared to other songs from the Disney universe. So I was not taken in at all by the audio from the very beginning. But the visuals, the story, I was actually pretty compelled by how becoming self-aware. I was like, whoa, Colin's into this. He's like leaning forward.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
because you never know.
No, you really don't.
Not just with you, but with anybody. You never really do know. The soundtrack is going to be a huge part of this conversation. I can't wait to talk about that with you, especially Let It Go. I mean, that's kind of a absolutely necessary part of the talk, I think. But, I knew about Disney trying to adapt Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen into a film. I think Walt himself had been trying to do it intermittently since before World War II. This was on his plate. And they could never really figure out a way to make the adaptation work for animated film. And they tried throughout the years. They would pull it down, throw it into pre-production, try to write a treatment, put it back on the shelf, and every few years they would pull it off until somewhat recently in the aughts, Glenn Keane had the property and was trying, Glenn Keane is the animation wonderkind. He was with Disney for many years. He's with Google now. But he was like the traditional animation sensei over there, and he was trying to develop it. He got really frustrated with whoever was the power. It might have been Eisner still over there at the time, and actually quit production and moved over and said, we're putting Rapunzel/Tangled into production. And that's why Tangled got done, and the Snow Queen just fell into development hell. And I didn't think anybody was going to resurrect it again, but they finally did. With Jennifer Lee coming on and Chris Buck, which we could try to get to later on. So the Snow Queen was trying to be optioned and pulled off by Disney for years. And I think they finally tried to figure out a way. It is so interesting, though, that you say, like, Disney does do this thing where they take these deeply dark, serious stories of old, whether it's an old fairy tale or something that was more, intended for adults or something much darker, try to option it into G or PG rated material. And they do pull it off. That charm offensive works because when they do it right, like in Frozen, by the end of the movie, you're like, oh, cool. I feel great. That's wonderful. I want to show this to my kids over and over again. But, it does harken back to things like Bambi, right? Where it's like there's no parents or one parent or orphaned kids. Like the parents die in this pretty early on. The kids, the daughters, the princesses are left by themselves. And then what's even darker happens even before the parents' death, which is the daughters are split apart. And the youngest has no explanation for it whatsoever. She just kind of thinks her sister hates her.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of
pretty
fucked. Yeah, it is.
Like if Elsa could just tell Anna, like, and by the way, the Anna thing is very Mario. So you got to do you, Kyle, and everybody else out there.
Yeah, what is it? Well, what is it? What do they say? They say Anna, right?
I think they say Anna, but I think they say Anna just because it sounds a little more highfalutin and proper than, like Anna sounds very American, like, it doesn't sound as royal.
The American
Mario. Yeah. So I think it is Anna, but I think, you got to leave everybody to their own devices when it comes to that pronunciation, I think, because that's
I'll try to watch that.
That's kind of specific to geography and growing up, right? It is very much like the Mario thing.
Well, it bothers me when I hear Cog say Mario and how he really leans into it and embraces it. And I was like, damn, dude, I said it like that for the first 23 or 24 years of my life. It was beaten out of me.
Me too.
And
Same.
And it's a shame. Like he just kind of held on to it and was true to himself, where I don't think I'll ever say, I actually do just say Mario now.
That's
like,
what I say.
It does just, but I used to have to think about it.
That's so weird.
But I don't have to think about it anymore.
It is funny though, because it's like I had a friend who moved to England from the United States when he was young. And then over that 6, 7, 8 years of living in London or outside London, totally took on an English accent. He was at a very impressionable age too. I think it was like 11 to 17. When he moved back, we discovered he had the accent and thought he was faking it for years. But then realized, like, no, it just happened, So if a full-fledged accent could happen, the Mario becoming Mario thing could definitely happen. And that speaks to me too, Kyle, because it happened to me as well. So I say Mario now, just I know naturally that's just what comes out, oddly enough.
But what is weird and must be said, it must be said.
Yeah.
Is that where we grew up and where not one person ever said Mario.
No.
And they didn't, no one corrected anyone. That's why there's ownership over this. Like, this is the way it's said. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. Like, it's not like I came from a farm or something. I came from a real, there's millions of people where we're from.
That is hilarious.
I'm telling you, we're saying Mario. I don't know.
I mean, it's true. And Cog stayed, as far as I know, in the Northeast, right? He's in
Jersey City, I think.
North Jersey. Yep. And we moved around. So, Cog really benefited.
Yeah, I mean, the games industry certainly says Mario, but who cares?
Yeah, that's true too. So, but with Anna and Elsa, let me just break it down why it's sad for both sisters. They're estranged. They're forced into this estrangement. Elsa knows the reason. She's a little older. Anna doesn't know the reason at all. They're kind of very different anyway. I think Elsa is a more introverted, insular character. She's a little more mature. She's 3 years older than Anna. Anna is the dreamer. She's the free spirit. So they are very different already. They even established that in the 3 minutes we see of them as little girls together. But what ends up happening is because of Elsa having to be separated for everybody's protection from this dangerous magical ability she has, both sisters are kind of forced to be something that they're not. Elsa's forced to bury deep down who she is, suppress it, hide it, hide away, pretend this power doesn't exist. And Anna, who is this people person who can't be with people, she's robbed of her kind of fun craving, adventurous, extroverted self because she's forced into a life of loneliness. So neither one of them could be themselves. That's really the tragedy. But Anna, your heart especially bleeds for Anna because she doesn't really know why. She has no idea why this is happening. I always think with Anna, what gets me frustrated is you're such a cool, likable person. You're this dreamer, this free spirit. You're a lot of fun. Like, just go make some friends. Like, if it can't be your sister. But then I think back, the whole idea is creating this very tight bubble of people that are allowed to be around Elsa. Like, they even make a very quick off the cuff comment about, we're going to cut down the servants by like 80%. Like, the people that are around Elsa's orbit have to be very few people because this is dangerous. Anna almost died. So Anna really can't even have any friends unless she goes and plays out in the village and not in the castle, whatever it is. So it is a very tragic thing, and it gets very strange. I think it's a reason why it's kind of a proper strategy to kill the parents off, because you do wonder, like, all right, wouldn't the parents see this young girl milling around the house, miserable that she has no one to play with and no one to be with, and finally put her on their knee and be like, look, your sister is dangerous. Like, that's what she loves you. She just can't be around you. You don't remember this because some rock shaman troll.
Because we brought you to the woods where a fucking medicine man gave you.
But it's so sad for Anna, and she's already so likable. You have Kristen Bell's voice. It's very appealing. That you're like, oh my God, like, why can't somebody explain to this poor girl what's happening? It's really, really interesting. And I think at its core, I just like the fact that it is a story about siblings. And this kind of wedge, bad blood, whatever it is, could be about really anything, and it always does seem like in those situations that we know in life, like one of this, the problem is really with somebody and they don't really know how to express themselves. And the other person is the one that really pines for the relationship to be back to where they would like it to be. So even though it's a fairy tale, it speaks to reality, like the best Disney movies do. It makes you feel like you could put yourself into their situation and kind of be empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do talk about killing off the parents. I like that shot, actually, of the boat sinking. I thought it was very well done. And it is really sad. They don't really, unless I'm mistaken, they don't really show many of like their retainers or anything. And there is a shot of Elsa with her servants and they all have gloves on. So it makes you wonder, who does know? Like, someone knows, right? Like, people know outside of this. They do trust a certain amount of people with this knowledge. Were you, by the way, did you feel like you needed more information about the curse or about what's going on with her? Because I felt like the mystery was kind of cool. It seems like so few things let that happen anymore. Not that this is a newer piece of media, but it is somewhat new. And I was pretty surprised that they let that go, in the sense that they're like, it's not really very important. And it's really not.
Yeah. No, but it's a big gap of information that's missing. And I think everybody with half a brain on their shoulders, even little kids, would probably be asking, like, why does she have this power? If I'm not mistaken, it's amazing how little I remember Tangled 2. I don't know why it was less memorable to me. I even was questioning whether I saw it until Frozen 2. Sorry, yeah. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, when I got Frozen, I just wanted the DVD, the Blu-ray, because this was such a big part of my life. When I opened the cabinet, I saw Frozen 2 in there, and I was like, no, I must have seen it. I think they cover the origins, like they answer these questions in the second Frozen. But it is kind of crazy that they go this whole movie without really explaining the nature of Elsa's powers, where she gets it from, any of her origin. They just kind of leave it on the table. I'm okay. I can suspend my disbelief. My biggest thing, again, is just my sympathy for Anna. It's like that's what keeps bringing me back to wanting to. That's the one thing missing that I wish that was sort of dealt with, because it almost seems too cruel, for like, and by the way, the king and queen, you're an American history buff, Kyle. I don't know if your history knowledge goes back this far, but like, Helene and I are reticent to get on an airplane together. Like, we made a will out a long time ago when we first started traveling by plane for vacation without the kids, because God forbid, it's like splitting up sports teams, right? It's a morbid thing to talk about. But like, the president and the vice president never fly in the same plane together. That sort of dynamic. Did kings and queens of old in actual real life, were they mindful of that? Because this king and queen should not have been on the same ship together.
Well, I think my interpretation of this is kings and queens didn't share power. You know, you usually, sometimes it was a queen, but it was the king, and the queen was irrelevant. Sometimes, mostly with queens. So you think about like Queen Elizabeth I,
right,
where she never got married and things like that. So I guess my point is that I don't think that they traveled together very much at all, because these were usually stately arranged marriages, and the queen and king probably weren't going overseas together very often, if at all.
That's true.
I don't think you would have, and I don't know that people did grand tours. Famously, you know, Peter the Great in Russia in the 1600s famously went to Europe and got really inspired, and actually went. I don't know if you know much about this. He actually went incognito.
No,
like he went as if he was just like a normie.
That's
and like with a group of like Russian emissaries, but he was extremely tall. I want to say he even today he would be tall. I think he was something like 6'6" or something like that. So he had like a reputation around, you know, Europe, and so people kind of knew it was him, I think. But he was just trying to go and like learn things and figure things out and then bring it back. That's where St. Petersburg comes from and all the rest. So,
shit.
So yeah, it happened where they went overseas, but typically speaking, I don't know. They were sending their emissaries. The king usually didn't. You have to. This is kind of an old school thing too, and I'm not a medieval history buff at all. But your castle would get sacked in about 2 seconds if you left it, as well. In a lot of these different things.
That's
the second there's like a vacuum of power, and
yeah.
they can just withstand a siege and just you're gone. That's why you see that in Game of Thrones a lot, where people are like, you can't leave. Like there are people that just can't go places. You know.
Makes sense.
So that's that. There's that too. I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent, but
that's fascinating. Kind of like the what Queen Amidala Padme thing, you know,
right.
Send out this look-alike,
right?
You know, type of thing.
Padme of Long Island stock. All right. So I will say the Build a Snowman song was probably the strongest one for me, and I do like how they play that on both sides of the tragedy as well. Kind of stitch it together, which I think is pretty clever, and the reflections of it. But again, it comes back to why anyone just wouldn't talk to each other. Even, and we'll get into it even at the end where Elsa's going crazy. It's like, why can't Elsa be like, listen, I'm telling you, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't, why do we have to play these games? God, people just use their fucking mouths and speak to each other. But I want to move forward. We see Arendelle, the town, real Japanese role-playing game vibes from this world, in my opinion. Not so much in the wild. It's a little too simple. But I don't know if you got that same vibe too. It feels like a Dragon Quest town or something like that. I dug it. I dug it a lot.
I never see a medieval style village without thinking about JRPGs.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, D&D or whatever.
Totally poisoned. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's funny because I wrote here, like there are so many cool moments in these scenes. Like I love when Anna is draped in the curtain and twirling and doing all that kind of stuff doing all the stuff with the portraits and paintings in the room, like that she's going to finally have some social engagement or whatever. It does make you wonder, like what you were saying with, why couldn't they just get this kid a fucking friend? Like, does anyone care? Where is everyone who's watching over these kids and not tending to their social development as well? But there's a lot of physical comedy in it. And I thought that was pretty cool. And that's not unusual for Disney and Disney animated films. But the one thing I started to kind of glean out of this early opening sequence is that, and I do wonder what you think of this, is that this movie seems to lack a villain in some meaningful way. And if anything, Elsa is the villain in some sense, not wittingly, and she doesn't want to be. But what do you make of that aspect? Do you feel like there is no villain? There is no Ursula. There is no Captain Hook.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I found that strange, actually. And when they introduced the Duke character, and by the way, the introduction of the Duke character with his Anna, it's just amazing when he's dancing, like when he wants to dance with her and his like his hairpiece falls over. It's wonderful, just totally hysterical, really well done. But I was like, this guy's too goofy. But that's maybe the closest thing you get to a villain as well in the movie. But he's not really a villain. I mean, if you think about things from his perspective, how is he a villain? Like that's why it's so confusing why no one will talk to each other in the movie of Frozen. to just solve this diplomatically. But what do you think about that? Talk to me about Arendelle. Talk to me about the lack of a villain, whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I love the fact that, see, I'm a mark for the traditional Disney model. It's right. You know, have the bold and just, you know, the bold approach of cashing in on the deliciously evil villain. You know, I love my Ursulas. I love my Scars. Who else would fit in that mold? Jafar, Captain Hook, Maleficent. I like the traditional sort of evil, beyond evil Disney villain because it's fun and it's over the top and it's big and it's blustery and it's a very specific sort of template for creating a story. But what they do here is actually really interesting because, first of all, if you don't know the story the first time going in, you can conceive that maybe Elsa is going to be the villain. That's number one, which is really interesting and a little bit scary, especially if you love Anna, like I do. The other thing is they do plant that little fake, watered down, diluted villain in the Duke. You know, he's sort of the MacGuffin villain. He's sort of like the figurehead distraction, look over here villain. But what they really do is later on, and big spoilers, when they finally sort of unmask the true villain in Hans, that's a well-disguised villain, dude.
Definitely.
They don't do... Hans never turns to the camera after saying something sweet and kind of wrings his hands and, you know, winks and nods and, or, you know, grins or gives us an evil smirk. There is no tip. There is no tipping of the hat. You know, there's no magician showing the trick up the sleeve at any point along the ride that this is going to be the villain. And when he finally reveals himself, it's actually a pretty neat little scene. But I could say from my experience, I don't know if you found the same thing, the wool was totally pulled over my eyes the first time I saw this. Even
me too. I had no idea.
Right?
Even
if you might even think at different strategic points along the way that like, oh shit, is this guy on the up and up? And then it's quickly, you're quickly broken of that idea because he seems so virtuous. Like he really seems like a good dude. And you're worried about Anna. So you're kind of suspicious of her surroundings and the people that are in her direct orbit. But yeah, man, it's a really good formula. And I think a bold one for Disney because you don't get to cash in on those plushies and the t-shirts and, you know, everybody loves a Disney villain. Remember the Disney store? There was like always like 25% of that store that was just a Disney villain merch, you know? So certainly. I think that's kind of an inventive way to take, especially when you're doing the princess story, which is the Disney staple, right? And just kind of weaving a new thread into the Disney princess thing, taking it in a different direction that we haven't necessarily seen before, I think is really cool, especially if you're not being cute with, you know, we all know, like, everybody knows Hans is the villain except for Anna. You're not doing that old school, you know, thing where you're, you know, that's a very old sort of classic Hollywood trope where it's like, we're in on it, but the character, we're worried about the character because she's the only one that doesn't know. It would speak to Anna's lack of intelligence, which I'm glad they don't do here. You know, we're fooled along with Anna the whole time. So I like it, but I miss my Disney villains. I can't remember the last really cool traditional Disney villain that I loved. Can you remember?
The last one that I loved? I don't even know.
Mine might be Hades from Hercules, which was
I would go even further back than that, I would think.
Yeah, Ursula was amazing. Because she was a straight up monster as well, you know, physically, which was cool. You know,
just making her an octopus and all that, like, and giving her eel kind of henchmen. So I thought it was awesome. Yeah, I love villains. I mean, I love we've talked about that many times. I love the bad guys in things. Everyone, well, maybe not everyone, but we talk about G.I. Joe where I'd have to force myself to buy good, like the G.I. Joe characters. I'd have to force myself. You have to have a balance of characters.
So interesting.
Because they're so much cooler.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can buy like Army Man and fucking fatigues with a rifle. You buy this fucking pimped out laser Viper with a goddamn missile launcher backpack. You know, it's like, okay, I think I'll go with that. Thanks. But it's funny because you brought up the wool being pulled over my eyes, and I felt a little embarrassed in the sense I was like, I had no fucking idea any of this was. In fact, what I was really trying to square in my brain as I was watching it was, how are they gonna shape up this love triangle? And I was trying to figure out, okay, so you kind of want Kristoff to be with Anna, but it looks like Anna wants Sven, and maybe Kristoff turns into the nice guy, but then falls in love with Elsa or something like that. That's what I was trying to figure out, or so they end up together and maybe Sven ends up with, because I didn't know, you don't want any of them to get hurt if they're not the bad guy. And so, yeah, his turn was sudden. I really didn't see any foreshadowing of that, but I'm not the smartest person in the world. I'm sure there's something in there, but I was surprised by that too. But I was really interested in the lack of a villain, because after the coronation, when Elsa goes off and runs off into the mountains, you can't really blame anyone for being like, what the fuck are we supposed to do? Like, that's why I have a hard time with, even when they ignominiously send Weaselton away at the end, and he's like, it's Weaselton or whatever. Yeah, he's like a bad guy, I guess, but for most of the film, it's like, well, the queen just went crazy. I'm a lord in this land. We have no direction at all. There's no one around. We should definitely be skeptical of the woman using ice magic. To me, I just felt like they tried, but there was no way to really do it. The villain was, if anything, the curse in some sense. I guess I just never felt that compelled that any of them were truly bad, except for at the end when you realize how duplicitous and sinister Sven is, but he's not really the bad guy. The only thing he's going to do is kill Elsa. But you could kind of look at that and be like, okay, I mean, kill her. You fucking see everything that's happening around here? Like, she seems to be the source of it. But of course, the disconnect is that she can't control it, and they don't know, which goes back to the whole point of like, Elsa, just talk. Right. And try to at least explain everything. Even when she's in prison, and I love that they make those things for her hands to imprison her, which is awesome. Yeah, to stop her from using the magic, which I thought was a very dope. Not only a dope design trick, but I was like, man, if you have just for a normal person, that would have been so cruel to do that. Where you can't, you're in prison and you can't even use your hands. It seems like a torture device, like a legitimate torture device. That I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually designed on something that was real during the medieval or early Renaissance period. But yeah, what do you think about that? About you can't. So let's go back to Ursula, right? Yeah. Ursula wants, I mean, it's crazy. She's a bad guy. She wants Ariel's voice, right? So it's like this evil thing, this beautiful singing voice, and she uses all these curses to get what she wants. She's very obviously evil. Or Jafar, very obviously evil. Scar, I mean, I don't know. They called him Scar. Right. Captain
he wants
Hook.
To kill off his brother. Right.
But here, I just feel like that's actually lacking, which is strange. It is strange to your point of there's nothing to license. There's no one to glean onto, but also bold, I think, because the story is a little bit more meta than Disney stories usually are. I'm not even entirely sure what the movie's about and like what the ultimate lesson is. It's like a really sad look at people who refuse to talk to each other and fuck everything up as a result. But there's no like, we gotta vanquish the evil. And so when Weselton is being put onto the ship and sent back, I don't feel like you can really blame him. And that's just my honest take on it. Yeah. Like what no one is coming to, like, no one, there doesn't seem to be anyone in charge.
No, well, there really isn't, right? There really isn't. There's a big vacancy left there. I mean, right. The Weselton people are coming. It is interesting, the point you raised, because they're coming basically to cash in on this place, on Arendelle's resources, right? To open up trade. And, it's this place, which, again, it's a stark reminder of everything you just said. Elsa's powers and her parents' decisions based on the fear of the world, knowing those powers, or Elsa creating calamity with those powers. Her parents basically create this whole situation by insulating Arendelle from the world, right? By cutting Arendelle off from the rest of the world for a long period of time, apparently, right? A pretty long period of time, 10 years, 15 years, something. They're creating this fascination with this place, right? So when it's time for Elsa's coronation and it's time to open up again and reveal Arendelle to the rest of the world and sort of become like a player in trade or diplomacy or relations or whatever, everybody else is rushing in to discover this amazing, beautiful place with all these resources, with two beautiful princesses. So everybody is like, oh my God, they're all over it. They're fascinated with it. They want a piece of it, right? It's this new thing that everybody wants a piece of. But the parents set up this whole dynamic with everybody having to wait, like what's behind those gates? What's behind those walls for 15 years? So they created the fascination. They created that sense of greed of everybody wanting to take a piece of it. And it's also a reminder that Hans is a pretty insidious character because he gets in really deep and gains everybody's confidence, including ours, before the big reveal about that he just wants this kingdom. Like he's the one who wants this kingdom. He plans that, he knows that if all goes according to plan, Elsa's going to be dead. He just basically signed on his death papers, right? He puts out the fire, leaves her in that room. Her heart's already been frozen by Elsa inadvertently, so she's going to die. He's going to be left in the power vacuum. He's going to inherit everything, right? And we don't find that out until way later. But that makes him really evil. He doesn't look evil. Just looks like a handsome, would-be prince that's 13th in line in his kingdom. It's the only way he's ever going to inherit royalty, right? He's the only way he's ever going to become royalty. And, the other guy, the Duke and his lackeys, his army coming from this other place, this Weselton place, he's just looking for, we don't know anything about Weselton, about Weaseltown, but, they just it seems like they just want a piece of the riches, man. They just want whatever it is, this ice trade, this beautiful place, this prosperous place. They just want a piece of that. But it is interesting that the king and queen of Arendelle kind of created this. I mean, they didn't mean to create this situation, but they're the ones who kind of put the wheels in motion.
What you're saying, though, kind of also reminds me of why I think they don't really get into the semantics of anything, because what are you going to say to the 6-year-old girl that's sitting in the movie theater? Because they do say something like, well, we're not trading with you anymore or whatever. And it's
right.
Like, 6-year-old girl's just standing there like blank face. It's like, it's the beginning of episode 1 all over again.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly right.
And so I think you got to maybe come up with some better. This could have been massaged a little bit better. I don't know what the original story was. Like, what is it, Hans Christian Andersen or something like that?
Yeah.
So I don't know anything about the original story. I didn't even. And I said I know that a lot of them are based on the stories of the past. But I remember when we did The Little Mermaid, I had no idea that was actually like a real story too. So I don't pretend to know the subject matter, and maybe this is what it was. But it's surprising that they didn't. I think they could have adapted it a little bit, maybe more cleverly, to get a little bit more of that pop and that juice. Like, what is the true sinister thing that's stopping Elsa from just talking? Because that's really what the movie's all about. And I'm not trying to diminish it, because I think it's really good and I think it's really fun, but that really is at the center of it. I needed something more to compel Elsa to be quiet. If that makes any sense. Like, what is it?
Totally makes sense.
Like, in other words, if you say anything to anyone, we're going to kill Anna or whatever. Right. It's like, that's different.
A palpable threat.
Right. Or let's say she tells a friend when she's a kid before her parents go off on this trip, and the ship is sunk by someone who's like, you shouldn't have, you're talking to me. Like, that person becomes the kind of the villain. Someone that's missing here. And
it's definitely missing.
I feel like that would actually be missing if it wasn't animated too. It's not just that it's a Disney animated movie.
No.
But it was a decision that they obviously clearly made and felt like they didn't need. And I do like the tight, small cast of characters. So yeah, you don't need another Jafar or something like that.
Right. You don't need that demonstrative villain. But you know what's interesting, Kyle? You know what you remind me of? It is weird. Like, why do you have to adapt the old fairy tales? Why can't you just say, all right, Little Mermaid's about, this underwater kingdom of mermaid and mermen, and they live in the water and there's an evil witch, and just go with that. Like, don't try to adapt it from this original source material and get hamstrung with trying to make something dark into something G-rated and all that kind of thing. Just say with Frozen, right? We want to have this thing. It's this sort of fantasy world. It's a kingdom of snow and ice. We have this princess. She has magical ice powers. Let's go with that. That's it. And then we could fill that in with whatever details we want or don't want accordingly. You know what I mean? Like, break it down to the bare bones and adapt it from those ideas, those core ideas, rather than this entire old fairy tale. I always wonder what Hans Christian Andersen and these other classical authors would, and poets and everything would say if they knew that these were going to be adapted into these things called cartoons for kids later on. It's a very strange model, and it's been going on for so many decades. It's like, I like Pixar's approach better. It's like they just sit down and pen a story. Sometimes it's loosely adapted from something. Sometimes it's just, it's the small germ or the seed of an idea, and they write it, like a Toy Story, right? So it is weird that you kind of tether yourself to these old stories that seem like you really have to push and pull it and massage it, and sculpt it into something that it wasn't really intended to be. It seems like way too much work to do, rather than just take these small ideas and build them out and make it into a proper kid story that will also entertain adults, rather than have to say, like, it's almost like they feel the need to say in the credits, based on the original story, The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. Why? Like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Why do you have to do that?
Well, yeah, it goes back to the idea of there only being like 7 types of stories. And so it makes you wonder why they do that as well, and why, especially being so true to something that is in the public domain. So you can break it apart and bust it open as much as you want. You don't have to be true to it. So that is a good point. And I don't know if it's because they're looking for some sort of guide and stay within the rails. This is a very good production mantra, right? And I understand that as well. But yeah, make something new as well. But I also think in some way, it's the power of some of these old writers like a Hans Christian Andersen and these other, it's very much, different, but very much like Mark Twain and some of these other guys that I think just are never going to kind of go away, no matter how old they become, because they tapped into something. I think Jack Kerouac might actually be someone like that too, where they just tapped into something that's always going to be relevant.
Right.
And I think there's something human and humanistic about going and saying, hey, Hansel and Gretel is a lesson that can be learned to this day about a bunch of different things. And like, even the whole setup, horrible stepmother, you're fucking kind of cast out into the world, right? Like that's like hundreds of years old, that story, but it kind of still makes sense to people, I think. And that's why you still talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a powerful thing, as opposed to most writers, certainly in the game sphere, like the games I've made and will make. The reality is that they'll probably just fall into complete obscurity, which is fine. But there's always going to be your BioShock and your Last of Us and all these things that kind of persist. And then when people finally go back to those, they're going to want to probably be as true to them as possible. Much like we talk about the Resident Evil stuff today. So I think maybe it's a little bit of a sign of creative respect as well. But yeah, just drawing the inspiration from it and creating your own thing would have been pretty cool. But it does differentiate itself. It's very different. It feels like a very different sort of Disney movie to me. Not that I, again, have a lot of experience with newer stuff, because I just really don't. So I want to talk about the animals and kind of also like the amorphous non-human creatures. So the trolls, Olaf, Sven. What do you make of these designs? I think that they're so wonderful. And one of the things I love about Sven specifically is that Kristoff speaks for him, basically. And it's really cute. And then when he's baby talked later on, he's like, don't talk to him like that. Which I thought was so cute and so funny. I love how they share the carrots and do all these things. So I really, really dig Kristoff and Sven and their camaraderie together. I like how he rides him. He's a reindeer, right? It's like, there's that one scene where he's acting like a dog and he's like pouncing around like it. I was like, this is so cute. What a wonderful design. So I got to give a shout out to that design. And I like the trolls. They're pretty cool, the rock trolls. But Olaf he stole my heart. He really did. He literally really stole my heart. I was like, this character is a classic Disney character. He's the character that I'm going to draw out of this movie more than any other one. I love Robin Hood for a lot of reasons, the Disney movie, but I love Robin. I love Robin.
Great.
In
character.
this, I can they're all great characters, but I was like, dude, Olaf's the guy. You know, he's kind of my guy. So
steals the show.
So talk to me about these non-human characters.
I mean, Olaf is, for me, I forgot how delightful of a character he was. I was posting this on Instagram today in preparation for doing the show. I just said, I posted a little clip of his 2-minute song, his In Summer song. And I was like, this might be the best 2 minutes of a modern animated film, like within the last 50 years. It's a complete departure. It's a complete one-off. It's totally unnecessary, as is probably the character, by the way. I mean, he's just a vehicle for levity. But that sequence is so smart and just so irresistibly funny that I could see somebody saying it's completely unnecessary. It's just tacked on baggage. But I think that would be irresistible to put in the film. Once that was probably storyboarded and carried out in animation, I can't see that having the restraint not to put that in. It's wonderful. And the character, I mean, this is why you do it in animation. This is why you do an animated film and not a live action film. You're capitalizing on all of the things that cartoons could do, you know? First of all, shout out to Josh Gad.
Oh my God.
I know,
Kills it.
I mean, his voice is made for cartoons. And I know he does a lot of things. I know he's a comedian. I know he's in a lot of movies and shows. In fact, I just caught him in something. What TV series? I'll think of it. Where he did a little bit part. But I'll always think of him as Olaf.
Oh, The Boys?
I'm not sure. No, I saw him.
Was it Curb?
That's right. He was in Curb. He plays the
chiropractor.
He plays the chiropractor with the underwear problem.
Yeah, I'm reading it now here in his thing. I haven't actually seen that season yet, but yeah, he's
dude.
I haven't seen the last 2 seasons of Curb, I don't think.
That's only 1 or 2 episodes that he plays. Yeah, I won't ruin that for you. He's amazing in that. Oh, I saw him in New Girl, actually. I saw him in New Girl.
Oh, New Girl.
He does a bit part in that. But I'll always think about him as Olaf. The thing about Olaf is he's a hilarious character because he's one of those characters that, you know, physically he could do that whole thing. He's so playful. Like he could fall apart. He could rearrange his pieces. He could put himself back together again. It's hilarious physical comedy. But what makes it so cool is that he can't really get hurt. He's just a creature made of snow that was magically brought to life. So it's not like an animal. You know, you could do all the physical comedy and not have to worry about him. It just makes it cute and fun. And the other thing that dawned on me about this character is when you look at his design, he's not even that cute as far as traditional appeal. He's kind of a weird looking character. Like he has this giant carrot nose. He has an egg-shaped head. There were probably 5,000 other ways to make a cute snowman, but there's something super cute about him, even though physically he's not that cute. But I love the fact that they take this film that's rooted with these traditional human characters, these princesses and this drama, and they take this really whimsical character whose legs aren't even attached. Like his body floats off of his legs. It's very cartoony. It almost even walks a line of being appropriate for this kind of film. But I love the fact that they could do something zany in this somewhat grounded, realistic world. Because if it was just Olaf Snowman Land, you could get away with a lot. But then that musical number is also very inventive and very cute. It's very quick. A lot of great jokes in that part and a great introduction to the character. But, you know, there's just something, it's so simple. It's such a simple formula that you see in fiction all the time. It's just playing on the idea of irony. It's like this character is attracted to, nay, obsessed with the one thing that could kill him, right? It's like an earthworm being obsessed with a bird, right? Or like a baby chick being obsessed with foxes. There's something hilarious about that because he's just ignorant. He's naive to the ways of the world, but it's also super dark if you think about it.
It's very dark.
It's dark.
I was actually relieved that they didn't kill him because they didn't. When Anna is like all cold and he starts the fire up, I'm like, they're gonna kill him. Like he like sacrificed himself to get this fire going for it, but they restrained themselves from doing that, thankfully, because the movie does have a dark edge, like it's not scary. That's the thing, is that I don't think anything's scary. There's no scary character in the movie. I mean, maybe the troll, if you think, or the marshmallow like creature that Elsa summons maybe is scary, but not even, because even that creature refuses to kill them. Doesn't try to kill them.
Right.
So
Good
now
point.
later it tries to kill some of them, but so to me, I feel like it's all between the lines. That's why I think good. It's so funny. It's like Willy Wonka, one of my favorites. That movie is not really for kids, although it is ostensibly for kids. You won't get it until you're an adult. And I feel like if this movie was available when I was a child, I don't think I would have understood the levels of how dark it is. It's very similar to why I think Pocahontas is dark in some way, and a few other Disney movies where you kind of have to get a little bit more of, you got to remove the Disney element of it and then just see it for what it is. And this movie's sad. But I don't think it's like a drama in some way, which I don't know that you would really, maybe they're all dramas, but it's a drama in the traditional sense.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And I dig that.
It's really silly with a deep subtext of darkness. You know what I love about it too, Kyle? It reminded me this time, I never thought of this before, but especially Gen X, like we grew up with a lot of content that was emotional and sentimental and sad. Like I think of Olaf, I think of Frosty the Snowman, right? The whole idea is the kids are going to have fun. He's this character that comes around to entertain the kids, and he's one of them, but they know when spring rolls around, this character is going to die. And he does, right? It's like that 70s, early 80s dynamic of, we're going to tell this kid's story and then we're going to make it really sad at the end. And I think it really scarred my generation a little bit. I think like a lot of like my neuroses come out of that kind of shit. It's like they kill Frosty at the end. He's a puddle. And they do bring him back again with the magic hat, but he does die. And you do see the kids around crying.
It's like a resurrection scene. Yeah.
It's like this joyful thing, but it's going to end badly. And it does. And this is kind of taking that and lampooning it and sort of showing it in a lighter way, but still referencing that darkness. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee and those people my age that are doing the screenplays and helming these projects, taking those things we grew up with and putting a new spin on it for future generations, And I think it's a nice balance of having the darkness, but not the darkness that we grew up with that made us into, helpless neurotics.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel you. And yeah, and going back to Olaf as well, I just love it. Why are you hanging off the earth like a bat? It's a really great line. And actually, when they finally get to, I was so engaged by this character, actually, like as a viewer, that when they get to the castle, and it's so funny, I wrote it down. He's like, why isn't she knocking? Do you think she knows how to knock? Which it's constantly, he's funny, dude. Like very judicious with what they're saying as well. It's not like he's talking all of the time.
No,
but he just always is. They're very, very witty and very, very, very funny. And when they tell him when Anna goes in by herself and tells him to give him a minute and he starts counting, I actually started counting in my mind, thinking all the way to 60, thinking like this motherfucker is literally coming in on the 61st second. And I was counting a little fast, so I got there, and then like a couple second beat pass, and then lo and behold, you hear him outside saying like 60. And like coming in, I was like, I fucking love it. I love that I was on the same level. I get this character, I think.
Right. And there's such sincerity to his ignorance. And you know what? He's not zany. He's not the typical cartoon sidekick where he's loud. He's not, he's not brash or stupid. Like if you close your eyes, in fact, it just sounds like a dude. Like Josh Gad's voice just sounds like your neighbor, like your Jewish neighbor.
Yeah, I was gonna say he sounds like a neurotic Jewish New Yorker. Many we've known.
Right? Exactly.
No
it's
insult.
Brilliant.
That's just a prototype. Just like the Irish Italian fucking Moriarty is also a prototype of an archetype of a Long Islander or whatever. So I totally got that vibe too. We talk about it a lot. There's something very attractive about Jewish style humor to me and to you, I think, and maybe to people that it's like the love of Seinfeld, the love of Stern, the love of Dangerfield, and all these different guys that, you know, have Larry David, just deeply Jewish or Jewish effect to them.
Yeah, it is the effect. It's the timing. Yeah, and the content.
They're deeply funny people, man. I mean, that's the thing is, I say this to Mike all the time too. I'm like, Black Americans, like African Americans, are fucking fun. That's a funny group of people, straight up, with a real sense of humor.
A gift.
And I think that Jews have a similar sense of humor because it comes from the whole philosophy, like we say, like, if you don't laugh, you'll cry kind of situation. And so I'm really I'm tuned into that. Like, I love Black humor. I think Black humor is some of the funniest humor. And so Jewish humor, and like just that, it's not Jewish humor as much as it's just predicated on that tri-state, that, you know, that Seinfeldish. We all know what it is.
It's something.
Yeah,
it's
and
something.
it's special.
Humor in the face of, you know, adversity, in the face of bias, all that kind of thing. And I think they'll tell you that. And, you know, it's a great theory, because you take Jewish comedy and you harken back, you know, probably to like, well, I think of like the Borscht Belt, you know, like East Coast, especially, that eventually migrated across the country, but, you know, 30s, 40s, 50s, which I guess even comes out of vaudeville in some way.
Right. Too. Like take my wife, please, kind of thing. Right?
Absolutely. You know, it's a cultural thing. Yeah. And Josh Gad just has that. And you know what? He went in, and, you know, maybe this was some kind of decision by committee, but I can imagine it was largely him. And he just said, I'm going to do me, you know, in this character. I just sound like this. You know, this is the way I sound, and
wonderful.
Maybe it'll lend itself to this character. It's brilliant. It's a timeless performance. It really
it's good
is.
Shit. He's the best thing about the movie, I think. I don't think it's even close, in my opinion. And by the way, a lot of good elements to the movie, but yeah, he's really special. And yeah, the very much like, I just flew in today and boy, are my arms tired, or the, you know, I spent a week in Milwaukee one day kind of joke.
Just classic.
It's good shit. Just really witty, quick shit like that. All right. So I wanted to talk to you about before we move on, because I mean, he's not a very important character, obviously, but this Oaken character, do you have anything to say about this scene? I love this scene, in the store.
He's like the Rosen Island.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
I am sorry about this violence. What do you think about that scene? I really like that scene a lot. It's very cute. He gets up. He's very intimidating figure. Apparently, this dude has done voices in other Disney movies as well. So apparently, he's like a part of their stable. But
okay, I don't know anything about him.
Yeah, but I liked this. I liked this one off because I keep saying game. The movie really limits the population of characters you're ever exposed to. I mean, even in a lot of wider scenes, I don't know if it's the limit of 3D animation at the time, or they don't want to make it look like shit or whatever. But it doesn't. They don't do very much. And so to see this like 5 minutes or so spent with this random character you never saw before or after, I thought was pretty cool. And not unlike a lot of what a lot of movies do, but it's like the gas station scene in No Country for Old Men.
That's a weird parallel, but that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a departure, and it's kind of inserting something different along the way, you know, like a different little set piece, a different little character, just a little kind of a side story that does integrate, though. It's not something you don't get. It's not a sidetrack. I like the character. I think he's cute. I love his gentle demeanor in opposition to his physical stature, which he turns out to be huge. And I love the dynamic of just having this store where he has this little cabin where he has one of each thing. You know, he's like, that's in the winter department. It's like one pair of boots and one pair of snowshoes.
Yeah, it's like a Zelda store or something. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Again, the guy reminds you of a Zelda or a JRPG type thing. It's just cute. And it also leads to one of my favorite very short moments in the film, besides Olaf's in Summer Song, Sven and Kristoff's little song together when they're in the cabin getting ready to go to sleep on the bale of hay.
Yeah.
Where, again, you had mentioned Kristoff, that whole thing where you have this Sven character. He's not, you know, he's this animal sidekick character, but, you know, gratefully they make him a talking animal this time. He's not a cute, sort of emphatic, pointing and squeaking animal like Nico and Pocahontas or something. Miko, I think his name is. But, you know, Kristoff is talking for him. But And it just so happens that Sven is also kind of gesturing along to what Kristoff is saying, like a dog. So it kind of fits. And I love that moment, which is back to back with the store proprietor moment, which is fun. And again, just an injection of levity into what could have been really a drama becoming melodrama. Important to have those comedic beats. And this movie does that really good, actually. Does it really well.
Why do you think that they made it so that Sven didn't talk?
I just think it's
because they have I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
I was just going to say, because when I saw that decision made, which you could tell early in the movie that he doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the horse character that you meet briefly, the Duke's horse or whatever.
Oh, that's right.
Not the Duke's horse, but
sure.
I love that character. I love actually the way he looks at Anna when he's like in his face, like he's almost like she's pretty or whatever. It's cute. It's a cute interaction. But they make a choice not to let the animals speak. But then they have the rock trolls, then they have the snowman, then they have the snow monster. So it seemed a little inconsistent. I did dig it, but it made me wonder why didn't they just speak? I do dig the hesitance to do that, but that is a Disney hallmark.
It's true. I like, you remind me of the trolls. I always forget about them. Yeah, I would say, in this world, it makes sense if the magical creatures, Olaf, the rock troll things, the shaman, whatever, like they could talk, but the animal characters don't talk. So you're kind of creating these rules. But I would say more so, I just think it was really inventive to have these buddies, the animal human buddy cop sort of dynamic where the human is talking for the animal. I've never seen that before.
It's cool.
Just
it's cute.
fun, cute little thing. And it makes Kristoff a little crazy too, which is interesting. You have this character. He's silly. He's simple, not incredibly intelligent, obviously heroic and courageous and virtuous and all that. Nice guy with a little bit of a tough outer shell. But what I love about Kristoff is he is a little fucking crazy. There's a little something off about him. He's still lovable. You still want him to end up with Anna, but he's not perfect. And I think that whole dynamic, or maybe the loneliness of like my best friend because you see him as a little kid, don't forget, with, you see Kristoff with Sven as little ones, he's Sven's a little buck. Kristoff's a little kid. They grew up together. So, Kristoff speaking for the animal is I just think that's a hilarious little thing, like one of those ingenious little touches that you put in that I honestly can't remember ever seeing that besides this.
And that's why I love when it's like, don't talk to him like that when he's baby talking. It's very, very cute. What do you think of the nature of ice magic? I wanted to ask you this. I love it. I love elemental magic, but we always get fire magic and a lot of different things and maybe some water and wind and all these, but ice, I've always had an affinity for this magic, whether it's, the blizzard spell or the ice spell in a Final Fantasy game or Shiva, the summon and all of the rest. I like the focus on ice magic specifically. I was wondering what you thought about that from an artistic and just a fictional point of view, in the sense that in terms of its aesthetic anyway, I love that it draws out the blues and the whites, and I just love that color scheme, and it's just so attractive to me. I love blue all day. So, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I love you bringing up Shiva. I think when I think ice magic, I have to admit, I still think Shiva before I think Elsa. I mean, it's probably neck and neck now, but for me, my nerdom goes back to Final Fantasy with the ice magic. Ice magic is cool, man, because you know what I love about it? It could be defensive and offensive. So it's pretty cool. It's not as violent as, let's say, fire or, electrical magic you think of, or even water. There's something cool about it because it could be a barrier, but so it could be defensive in nature, or it could also be sort of integrated into an attack. But what I love about it too is that it seems like something that would maybe take a little more nuance to wield than a fire. And I think probably a lot of people would talk about Avatar, the cartoon series, in this conversation, but I don't know it well enough to talk about it. But, I could see an ice wielder being somebody who's, you already associate fire with dark powers, the dark side of the force, evil. Same thing with electricity. And who's the electrical It's Leviathan. Who's the other? Jin? Is it Jin
Uh,
in Final Fantasy?
Ramu, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. But I liked that's the cool thing
That's
about
fucking
Ice.
sad. That might be the saddest answer to a question I've ever
It's
ever
like
been asked
riding
and
a
answered.
bike. You don't really forget, We're kind of steeped in this shit. But yeah, it's true though. But yeah, but that's what's kind of cool about Ice. It could be defensive, it could be offensive. It you would think like maybe it's the hardest thing to wield because it's so complex. But it lends itself well to the visual medium because it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch. I think you could probably say that about fire and all the elements, but Ice in particular, it's something special because it imparts snow and ice and frost, and maybe it could even involve water in some sense. So it's visually it's beautiful. I think that's a good point.
And we had brought up the trolls earlier. I was curious what you thought of them, the rock trolls. They're weird. It's strange. I don't know if I really care about them or not. They're cute. I like how they have different like the shaman type position and the motherly kind of one and all of the rest in that. It's cool that Kristoff has a relationship with them, but it seems kind of ancillary. I don't know that we would have lost too much if that was all just cut, actually.
Yeah, and they establish it early. It is a weird part of the movie because it almost seems like the one thing that they're trying to shoehorn in just feels like an afterthought a little bit more than all the other details. And they do establish quite early that, the king and queen go to them to help them with Elsa. They sort of appeal to them to help. So their magic, they have the magical powers in this land, apparently. They're the shamanistic people. And maybe they get into them a little more in the second Frozen as they sort of flesh out this world with the details and answer some of our questions. I'm not sure if the trolls are a part. I forget. But it is weird that you're like, in a lot of stories like this, you would have the king's right hand or the king and queen's council, a Merlin type, perhaps. But in this world, they have to leave the kingdom and go out to the woods to seek the advice of these people, this more organic, unexplainable, these little forces of nature. I agree with you. They're adorable. They're visually very appealing. I think they're really cute designs. They're another cute, cartoony element to inject into the equation. But yeah, they feel like, for me, maybe it's that one bit that would bear the most explaining. Like I could use maybe a little bit more of an explanation about how, just the relationship between these things and humanity and how that became a thing. And, why do they have the powers? Is Elsa's power directly related to them? I don't remember. Someday when we do the Frozen 2 conversation, we could find out more. But it does seem, right? It is, even though they do try to introduce us early, it's not like they just, it would have been really weird if we first meet them with the, their engagement song, where they're talking about Anna and Kristoff getting married. But so they do try to introduce us early on, but it still doesn't really help because it feels like they're an also ran in the story for some reason.
Yeah, I'm wondering, as we audaciously do sometimes on this show, I'm like rewriting some of this in my mind. And you could get rid of the troll characters and insert a villain character at the very same time. What it could have been is that, because I said I got this Russian almost vibe. Although I think I got the Russian vibe more because of the snow, which is really not there in the beginning. So who knows? But let's just say you have a Rasputin-like figure in your court. And he's like the shaman or like a priest of some sort or a mage of some sort. And you go to him, the family's been going to him, very similar. It's kind of like the Romanovs. The family's going to him for help, but it could be interpreted that he's actually doing things to hurt them behind the scenes or kind of manipulate them. And so he has the power to, they don't know where Elsa's power comes from. And they go to him for like all this various healing that they know they go to the trolls for. But what they don't realize is that he is the source of the spell and he's kind of manipulating their minds with the magic he's doing on them or whatever. And you could have had that. Then you could have had the villain character center to everything where he's going to use it to take over the kingdom. That explains, they're sent away. The parents are sent away. They die. Maybe this guy's like the looming as a specter, kind of like as a regent style character. I don't know.
I like that idea.
Cool.
And I like incorporating like a proper bad guy into it. It shifts the dynamic a little bit, but I do like that. Instead, you have this character that Christoph keeps referring to as love experts, right? That he's going to introduce Anna to. And eventually they end up there and do the whole fixer-upper song. And, it's also implied, but kind of in a weird roundabout way, that Christoph was raised by these things, or at least they adopted him from a young age, because I think we see them first meeting Christoph and Sven when they're little. And then, the one says, oh, I'm going to take you guys in, or I'm going to adopt you, or whatever. So, and then, they refer to Christoph sort of having that sort of like, they refer to him smelling bad and having bad manners and peeing in the woods. So it's implied that he's grown up, he was raised by wolves.
Yeah.
Is the equivalent.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you about this ending. What did you like? So Elsa sacrifices herself, or I'm sorry, Anna sacrifices herself, right?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, she.
Yeah, I miswrote it in my notes. That's why.
In the confrontation, she's
right.
hurt.
So Anna pulls like a Purim and Palom, and in Final Fantasy IV, and sacrifices herself to stop this sword and shatter this sword. Did you think they were going to revive her? I was like, oh my god, are they going to actually kill this character? Because so you have to understand, from my perspective, I was like, I don't remember ever seeing mention of that character in the Frozen iconography that I've seen around. I just remember Elsa.
Right. So
I thought it was like, is there going to be some sort of tragic like ending where Elsa's saved by her sister who dies or whatever, and that's all fucked up? So, but that didn't happen, obviously. But what did you think about this ending? And did it surprise you when she came? They brought her back pretty quick. I thought they could have let that hang for a little while. And maybe bring her inside, and they're trying to. This is a statuette, this ice statuette of her or whatever, and I don't know. Anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at 1:45, this movie does really move quick. I like a briskly paced animated film. I don't want any filler. I don't want to feel like it's slow. So, and that, that's a tough road to hoe. So I give them a nod for that, for sure. It's a very believable possibility what you just said, Kyle, because I can't remember, maybe I'm forgetting, but I can't remember a princess movie, quote unquote, with two princesses. And Elsa obviously is the star of the show in everything that came out of this film, right? Like, she's the glamorous one. Every girl wants to be Elsa.
Yeah, but
Anna.
Why? That's what I'm so curious about. It's like, why?
It's a very Gilligan's Island dynamic, Marianne and Ginger dynamic, isn't it? You got the one beautiful, glamorous one and the one that's more the girl next door. I'm always for the girl next door. That's just me. That's just who I am. I don't know. What do you think it is? You think it's 50-50 down the line?
Yeah, probably something. Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's
something like that.
It's just so strange that girls have gravitated towards Elsa more, just because I think that goes to show that the movie's thematically lost on most people that are watching it at their earliest age, or by the time they understand it. Very similar to what I was saying about Willy Wonka. It's you already you don't care really. It's really interesting to get all the adult subtext to it, but it's still what it is when you were a kid, right, nonetheless.
No, it's a good parallel. I like that a lot. And I think you could go into this movie thinking like it would be bold, but it's kind of a new age for film, for Disney. Maybe they do kill her off. You certainly like Anna enough to be worried about it.
Yeah, that would suck. Yeah, she's awesome. Yeah.
They could draw it out, like you said, and that would even make the drama even more, that would embolden the drama even more. But I think it's enough. And, it really speaks to Anna's personality. She really loves, despite everything, she really does love her sister. I think you're relieved at that point because, Anna knows why everything happened with Elsa at that point, even though it's not really discussed. It must be some sense of relief, not only for what initially happens, but then what later happens a little bit later at the coronation. Nat doubles down on Anna's misery and sort of her, her sister rejecting her, essentially. Even if it's for the right reasons, it goes unexplained and it seems, miserably cruel and all of that. But it is nice that, Anna gets, not only does she get to survive, but she gets her love, she gets her dream of that, that togetherness, because she's all about that. She gets to be with her sister too, because she's all about people. That's why you feel so bad for her. It's like she has that extrovert people energy. She needs to have some people. She had a miserable enough childhood, for God's sake. Give this kid some loved ones, for God's sake.
I like that character. I think she's awesome. Like that was the biggest surprise to me. Was I was just, obviously Elsa's the magic user and does all this crazy stuff, and she's very interesting. But Anna, I think she should be like the Disney princess out of this movie, in my opinion. But Dig, do you have anything else you want to say about this film? Because I have one last thing I wanted to say about it and kind of close with you. But I was curious if there's anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to discuss first.
All right, let me go into this before you go. I'm really interested to hear how you're going to close this out. But I think I could explain Elsa a little bit now, because not only is this movie a phenomenon, but that character is so sought after. And it's not just by little girls. It's not just by cosplayers.
Perverted men.
It's definitely some perverted men in there. I love your idea of those metal hand covering gauntlets. That would be cool, Elsa cosplay. I've never seen that.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah,
that would be really neat.
Have a little bit of like a BDSM vibe to it, though. If you went like that.
That definitely would. I honestly wasn't thinking that, but now you're right. And maybe we put the ball gag in there too. Jesus Christ.
Oh,
I mean, we can just go all the way with it. But I was trying to figure her out as I was watching this, because I watched it take place with my 6-year-old, then 6-year-old, and it was a phenomenon. I mean, it was everywhere. It was in the toy store. It was in the Target. It was at the checkout line of the supermarket. Like, there was Elsa, Frozen, but specifically Elsa, everything. Mac and cheese, cereal, dress up, toys, plush, everything, the whole thing. Again, I mentioned going to see this movie, probably saw it in the movie theater more than once, but I only tagged along the one time. But going to see Frozen on Ice, I mean, this was huge for kids, for Disney, whatever. But what is it with Elsa specifically, especially when you have the dynamic of Elsa and Anna, and people seem more drawn to Elsa, right? It's the glamour of the power. I think you have a good point there. She has the magical power. But when you see this character from the beginning, especially in the Let It Go song, which I think also speaks to the phenomenon of this song and the staying power of this track. You're going from this character who is completely stripped of her power to, by the end of this song, you're going from powerless all the way to super powerful. You're powering up over the course of like a 4-minute song. But you realize that it's something that everybody can relate to, I think. The character of Elsa, and I think you could sum up the character of Elsa in the Let It Go song, right? You have a character who's realizing her strength and power after being told to suppress that her whole life, right? It's kind of a thing about like shaking off your monkeys or breaking free from whoever or whatever is holding you back, which is something that I think everybody can relate to. There's a relatability to that, even down to like a 4-year-old kid. I think they could already see something in that. And, there's something about that transition from being utterly dejected and deeply saddened and emotionally crippled to fully commanding and like formidable and like maybe the most powerful person ever. There's a hyperbolic sensation of what we all want to feel. And no matter what we want, no matter what we're seeking, what we're held back by, all that kind of stuff. So I think that whole thing, the way it starts, the way it goes from A to Z, where you have somebody helpless to having somebody who is completely dynamic and realize their sense of power and their sense of strength, and that nothing's going to stop them. Nothing's going to hold them back. There's just something very relatable humanly to that. And all the way down to like that line of like, the cold never bothered me anyway. Like there's something, it's weird now to discuss 10 years on, because it's the song and the movie and the character, it's really bogged down in cliche now, but there's something very poetic about the character of Elsa, that song, and the notion of not only am I not only have I overcome all the obstacles and all the people and the things that want to stop me, but none of this shit meant anything anyway. This was all a joke. It's like the complete opposite of where you started the song, right? It's like, not only am I at the height of my powers, but I realize that I've always been at the height of my powers, and all this other shit was never anything was never, I'm the force to be reckoned with, slam, and she slams the door of her ice palace. It's really powerful. And I could see that's what kids are attracted to. I like the sweetness and the selflessness of an Anna. I'm attracted to that. Like, there's no glitz or glamour. The only thing she wants is companionship, friendship, sisterly love, whatever. She has very selfless needs. It's Elsa, it's different. The power is very attractive. Not only that, but she visually, like when she starts the song and she's sort of in her pedestrian clothes, and then she ends the song with that hair and that icicle like braid hanging down and that glamorous dress, and the way she's kind of moving with moxie, and she's striding, and she's got all that confidence. You know what I mean? I think that must be very attractive to a little kid. I'm thinking about specifically little girls, but little kids in general, to see like that empowerment of a character. And I think that's only sort of even further amped up by the way Elsa looks, goes from soup to nuts by the beginning of that song to the end. It's like a whole different character. It's like a reawakening. And there must be something that speaks to like even a kid who can't articulate that yet. For me, I think Anna's the more interesting character, but I could see why I could see the attractiveness of the Elsa character. I think it's all played out in that song.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And clearly that's what's played out. And that's actually kind of related to what I wanted to exit on, which was, I'm not a little girl. You're not a little girl. We weren't born girls. We didn't come up as girls. So I don't speak from complete authority, but we have sisters and a very matriarchal feminine family, with like the newer generation's kind of more male than female, which is different. And both on my dad's side and my mom's side. And so I think we grew up in a more female-centered world than would be normal. But I still feel like what stood out to me most about this film, with that said, is its hyper-focus on sisterhood and love of sisters. And I think we hear the term, and the term is thrown around, brotherhood. And much like the term man, I think that when you say like all mankind, you mean women too. When you say brotherhood, you mean camaraderie. I totally get it. I'm not trying to be pedantic in any specific way. But I think Disney taking the time, as they've often done in the past, to focus on females and to focus on little girls, I think is so important and so powerful. It's something that's powerful and not sexualized and not violent. And there's implications of maybe some sexuality. There's certainly implications of violence, like this really cool scene where the icicle goes up to the dude's neck.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I was like, that's pretty dope. But I think it's important that society continues to be, not only for commercial reasons where obvious little girls are, if you can market to little girls, I mean, you're going to make fucking bajillion dollars. I mean, and there's obvious commercial advantage to that. But I think just the society and the culture staying focused on the upbringing of little girls and continuing to give them positive output in a world that seeks to make them older and older, younger and younger. And I am deeply disturbed by it. And as someone who is 38 years old, I feel like I've seen, so you've certainly seen it if you've paid attention, it's just girls are growing up very fast. You can just see it when you go to the store, or just see it. And I'm like, well, this is not right. And like, we got to like recenter ourselves around more wholesome content, better role models for boys too. I really, and I say it all the time, and I know it's ironic and maybe even hypocritical because I play games and but I resent the hypersexualized, hyper-violent nature of society. I just think it sucks. I think it sucks when you watch Game of Thrones and they have to show 5-minute sex scenes instead of just implying it. I think it sucks when you're watching a cop show and they're just showing everyone getting their heads blown off or whatever. It's like, I'm not into it for these different things. And I think making sure to aim at a more wholesome, and this is Disney's MO, of course, but making sure to aim in a more wholesome direction, I think is good. And I think that was my major takeaway from this was what was like, wow, I'm not very familiar with what the contemporary, it's not so contemporary anymore, but like the contemporary little girl or girl female looks to as like high quality entertainment. I'm like, this is as high quality as anything, pretty much anything I grew up with that was male oriented. This would have been a huge movie back in the day too. So I guess that, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I wanted to say about it, was just like, I appreciated the focus on little girls and something that they would like that treats them like little girls in some way, even though there is that Willy Wonka level to what's really happening in the true darkness. It doesn't really play through, and that's not really what it's about.
I think that's well said, Kyle. I think that's really well said. I think it's odd with it because you have something like this which is empowering for kids, and rightly so, and does it in a great way, but it also doesn't speak down to them, which is a problem that I really have with kids media in general, whether that's TV or direct to YouTube content, social media, feature film, music. It doesn't matter what it is. I think a lot of the stuff does talk down to kids. That's something that I've always been really in tune with. Even as a kid, I was really in tune with that. And I think maybe it's a big reason why I went into animation and why I'm so attracted to doing stuff outside of the adult space. Like I'm attracted to doing work for kids, preschool, whatever, because I think it's difficult to create smart content in that space because you have to serve a lot of masters. You have to make sure it's educational, entertaining, relevant, contemporary. And I think you have to know, kids inherently know when they're being talked down to, or when the adults making the content don't get what they're making the content about, or don't get in the content. They don't really get what it's like to be a kid nowadays. I remember feeling that when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. Like, that's not the way kids talk at school. That's not the way a skateboard looks. That's not the way people dress in gym class. Like, no matter what it was, a cartoon, a live action show, something that I always was in tune with. And I think that's really something that Disney does a good job with in their feature content, especially, across Pixar. And I think they all do I think Illumination, Sony, Leica, I think they're all really good at that. I think the quality is very high beyond just the visual presentation. I never thought, I don't know that if I've seen a character catch on and become so sought after since Elsa. I think she might still be the character that was the most embraced and the most beloved by kids. Now, musically, a couple of years ago, I went into it very grudgingly, but Encanto, again, Disney's Encanto, that captured lightning in a bottle musically again. That got as big probably as Frozen did with the musical track. But I think as far as characters go, Elsa might still have the title. And you know what? I love what you say about just content that's sort of appropriate for kids, though, devoid of the sex, devoid of the violence, because I think people have been arguing this, I would say, since the 50s, that whole notion of kids are growing up too quickly. And so I've always heard that ever since I was alive, and I'm sure it was going on from a couple of decades prior to me being born. But I do think it has reached a fever pitch as far as over-sexualized media, over, too much violence in the media. And here's the thing, like, I'm not the book banning type. Like, I don't want to burn books. Like, that's not me. Like, I'm free speech all over the place. But the thing about protecting kids until they're ready is preserving that innocence is so important, because you only get that once. You know what I mean? Not to sound like hacky or contrived or cliched when it comes to this, but like, once you grow up, right? Once you discover the ways of the world, and, maybe it's R-rated movies or just finding out about the way sex works in health class. I don't know. Everything, just growing up in general, right? Now you could see it, we used to have to find Playboy books in the woods, right? Now kids just go on Google. But the thing about preserving that innocence for as long as possible is that you can never go backwards again. You know what I mean? And there's something special about that time, that magical time of being a kid, where I think in many ways it's just a simplicity. There's a real lack of complexity and just a magical time to existing in that space of just before recognizing, all the things that we're going to recognize as adults, if that makes sense, because you can never take it back again. It's like overcooking a steak, right? Like once it's medium well, it's medium well. You can't go back to rare. So it's like it's important to just kind of protect them from what they need to be protected to. And, that's beholden to the teachers and the parents. And there's some autonomy with that, obviously. More power to everybody. But there's just something really special about just protecting the kids from these things that eventually they're going to see, right? Like we all do. And eventually they're going to grow up. But before they're ready, just like let them hold on to their childhood innocence and, that childhood simplicity and fun and play and lack of anxiety, right? That whole thing. Like it's even a hard thing to articulate, but I'm a big believer in that. Like I'm not a big believer in not having every book available in high school. You know what? High school kids are ready. Let them read what's out there. You can't protect them from things that exist. That's not what I'm talking about. But yeah, let there be a growing up process, right? I think there's something very reasonable about that. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's, and I do. I agree with you. I think it's reached a fever pitch, and it is nice to have something that's appropriate for kids, maybe even challenges them a little bit in something like Frozen, and leaves them walking away with questions or concerns or feeling like they're concerned for a character in danger or feeling like, oh, maybe this applies to my life in some way, but not pushing the boundaries too much. It's thoughtful, doesn't speak down to them, but it's something that they could be, it's something that they could be ready for,
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought this one up. This was a good topic, Frozen, which is available on Disney Plus, which is where you watched it. I rented it on Amazon for $3.99, so no big deal there. Nice. So you have your options, obviously Blu-ray and DVD as well. And so go check it out if you haven't already. And thank you for listening. Dave, let's end this episode like we do each week with a dad joke.
Look what I got here. Now, for those of you watching, I got this box of dad jokes. I thought it was a book, but I think it's cards inside. Our sister got us this.
Oh, cool.
And I think I keep forgetting to pull it out on the show. So I'm just going to take a random card out. Is there one on each card? Yeah, there's one on each card. I think we might have done this one. Hold on. No, I don't think we've done this one. Okay. Kyle.
Yeah.
With thank yous to our sister Allie, I can hold this side up because you guys can see that side. Kyle, why do pancakes always win at baseball?
Something about the batter. I don't know,
oh,
right?
Nice.
Yeah. So,
you're halfway there.
What? They beat the. I don't know. What is it? I don't know.
They have the best batter.
That's like a 1 in 100 thing for me. You know that.
You nailed it.
That's a 1 in 100.
I feel like maybe that's happened 3 times.
Yeah, that might be like the third or fourth time that's ever happened at most. Well, that's a good
Congratulations.
And thank you. And thank you to Allie for sending those in as well. Appreciate you. Yeah, thank you for bringing this topic again. And I hope everyone out there enjoyed it. A little unorthodox for us, although not really. I mean, we've done some more womenly animation in the past, I guess.
I'm interested to see how people feel about it. Parents will be able to speak to this, but I'm really interested, and I'm interested in the parents too. I am one, but I am interested in seeing what the people outside of parenthood think about this topic. The animation marks will be in, but I don't know how many we have.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, we'll put it out there and find out. But Dag, thank you for your time. Appreciate you as always.
We'll
see you next time on KnockBack and Constellation, of course. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media. KnockBack, Sacred Symbols, Defining Do, Constellation. Could not do without you. Over at patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access. You can get merch at laststandmedia.store, including free domestic shipping on all stickers. And thank you again. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show is conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.